Laura Wilkinson is a diver, Olympic gold medalist, and the first woman ever to win the 3 major diving titles. And she's here on the show just now. Congratulations for all of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we've got you on the show now, because I was originally thinking, oh, we could maybe get you on around the Olympics, and here we are, months later, but it's great to have you finally here.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, the Olympics is always fun to watch and to recap it too, so no worries.
Yeah. So, first off, what's it like to be an Olympic and much more than that, just a diver in general? Is it fun?
I love it. I mean, there's nothing quite like the feeling of flying through the air and then just slicing through the water.
Yeah.
There's a certain feel you have when you hit just right and you know underwater that it was good. And that just, to me, that's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, that must be some kind of adrenaline rush, right? Because I suppose you've maybe gotten over this by now, but a lot of people would be terrified from jumping all the way from that height.
You would be surprised how many platform divers are actually afraid of heights. So, you have to deal with that. And there's the fears that the higher, you go up, there's the harder impact you can have if you make a mistake. And so there's that big fear in there, but then you can't just think about that. You have to be able to focus on every action and what you're doing and stay in the moment and putting that fear aside. And that's one of the biggest challenges of our sport. But at the same time, there's nothing better than like overcoming that fear. That is just such a good feeling.
Yeah, and is it true that you kind of have to build your way up? Because if you'd never done diving before and went straight for the 10 meters, you'd end up with a very serious injury.
Yeah, that could be bad. Yeah, I mean, there's all the way down to a 1 meter springboard and a 3 meter springboard. And then the platforms start at 5, 7.5, and 10 meters. And when you're in like the junior levels, like you're under 18, you can do all 3 of those boards, the 5, 7, and 10. But once you get to the senior level, which is more like Olympic level, then you have to go off the 10 meter.
Yeah. So what first got you interested in diving in the first place?
Well, I was a gymnast growing up. In the 80s, I was a kid and I saw that epic moment of Mary Lou Retton doing this perfect 10 vault in the LA Olympic Games. And I was like, I want to do that. And I want to stand on the top of the podium. So I had those big dreams of being an Olympic champion when I was, like 8 years old. But after a few years of gymnastics, as much as I loved it and I was decent at it, I realized I wasn't going to be the level I wanted to be. But that dream of the Olympics was still, burning really bright inside my heart. And so I just started to pursue other sports until I could find something that I thought I could, pursue the Olympics in. And so I tried, tennis and track and softball, and eventually found my way into diving the end of my freshman year of high school.
Yeah, and the thing is, diving was never really something we did at school. I don't know about you, so
No.
I guess it's harder. And also, I have no idea where the nearest diving board is to me, so I guess access to
Right.
diving is very limited.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because I had seen it on TV, and I'd even, we had a little springboard, like kind of like a little plank in our backyard pool, and we used to play around like doing gymnastics stuff. But I never thought, for some reason, that was a sport I could do until I ran into an ex-gymnast friend that had started it, and that's kind of how I found my way in. So, where I'm at, like in the U.S., our governing body is USA Diving, and so they have links on their website where you can find local clubs, and you can email them and get in contact with clubs that are more local to you. So for us, that's the best way to probably find something in your area.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess maybe it doesn't help that when you go to a normal swimming pool, the signs everywhere saying no diving, so you can't even
Right.
practice off the edge.
Right. We're a dangerous daredevil group.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't really know how much you'd know about the UK, but given that's our main listeners, do you have any advice for them in general on how to get into diving?
Well, I think it's the same thing. I mean, Great Britain Diving, I'm sure they have a website where you could probably start there because I know there's several clubs throughout the country. And they do like to do talent ID. Like sometimes they will go to schools and pick kids based on their body and what like kind of if they look like they might be the right fit or they're super flexible or something that has a good aspect of our sport. So start asking questions, start asking local clubs, maybe, it's really connecting with people and finding out where you could go, it's really just start talking to people.
Yeah, definitely. And to be a diver, I take it you don't really have to be an amazing swimmer because that's a separate sport entirely. You just have to be able to get out of the pool safely when you're done.
Yes, I doggy paddle to the side. No big strokes for me. And it's funny because we get lumped in with swimming a lot. Like here in the US, we do in college, the divers are considered part of the swimming team. It's the swimming and diving team. But we're in water, there's nothing the same. We're more like gymnasts that are instead going headfirst into the water. I would say we're more like gymnasts or trampolinists. That's kind of more of our skill set. So it's a big difference.
Yeah, and even a big difference in the way that the sport is actually won, because it's not really a clear winner that you can see. It's sort of done based on aesthetics, right? Is that how it's done? Basically, you have to look good.
Yeah, exactly. There's a scoring. Like we have judges, similar to gymnastics, figure skating, but you also have degree of difficulty. So you get to choose the dives that you're doing, but you can either choose something with low degree of difficulty that maybe you'll score higher on more consistently, or you can kind of gamble a little bit and up that degree of difficulty, but it may take more risk on can you hit it as well. So, and that's multiplied by the scores that you get on your dive. And so it kind of all adds together at the end. So, and there's also, I don't know if you've seen the synchronized diving. Have you seen any of that in the Olympics?
That's great.
And that's a great spectator event for people who don't know the sport very well, because it's super easy to see, are these two people going at the exact same time? Does it look like one diver in the air? Is it really off? So that tends to be a like more spectator friendly event. And it's really fun too. It's kind of our only team event right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that's the thing with watching diving. In an athletics or swimming race or whatever, you can clearly see who's won. But diving, you have to wait until the scores come in before you can celebrate.
Right. So there's always those anxious moments where everybody's just holding their breath waiting.
Yeah. You, of course, won a gold medal back in, what year was it, 2000 or something?
Yeah, 2000, 21 years ago. It's crazy.
Yeah. So I've seen the video of it, and when you started competing, you were in last place, I think. And I think the commentator said you're basically got no chance of having a medal, and then you managed to completely turn it around and win gold. So what was going through your mind? Is it a kind of never give up mentality?
Oh, for sure. And diving can be exciting like that, because it's you can't give up until the last diver has done the last dive, because anything can really happen. We had at that point, they used to carry over some of our scores from a previous round, from the semifinal rounds. And so I was in a little bit of a deficit. That's why I was in 8th place going into the final 5 dives. But after the first dive, I jumped into 5th. And in the third round of 5 girls that were in front of me, completely missed. I hadn't seen them miss the entire month. I guess felt the pressure, and everyone missed, and I jumped into the lead by like a point. And so, and I couldn't see the scoreboard at that point, but I knew that something had happened. There was a big shakeup, and I had to be within striking distance. And so, a lot of people, diving is a very mental game. Most sports are. Ours is just kind of substantially on the mental side. And there's sometimes when people do a bad dive early on, or they know they're behind, they kind of just give up. But I have won several world titles with missed dives in early rounds. But you have to just continue, plowing away and doing your best, because you just never know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes you see the divers look pretty pleased with themselves when they have finished their dive. So I take it there is an element of knowing that you've done a good job.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Especially maybe it's a harder dive or it's a more important moment, Some people try to keep their poker faces on, but usually after that last dive, all the emotions start coming out.
Yeah. Where do you actually keep your gold medal then? That's what I want to know.
Well, it's in a very secret spot in my closet. No, I just keep it. I kind of keep it handy in this little case, because I like to take it to events that I'm doing. If I show up at a meet where there's a lot of young athletes, like I'll take it out and let them touch it, wear it. Because the very first time I saw an Olympic gold medal, it was my freshman year in college, and one of the swimmers had just been to the Atlanta Olympics and won 3 gold medals, and he brought them in for us to see. And I had always been an Olympics junkie. I'd always had these big Olympic dreams, but I hold his gold medal that made me understand how real it was and how like this guy just went and did this. It's actually possible. It's not just a dream. Like this person accomplished it. And so something changed inside me when I got to hold and see those medals. So I love to do that for like the next generation coming up. I love to inspire and encourage people, hopefully in that same way. That there's just something powerful about realizing that these dreams we have can actually come true.
Yeah, definitely. And you'd had a bit of an injury before you won the gold medal, so I guess it's an even greater achievement to have got one.
Yeah. I broke my foot in 3 different places about 3 months before our Olympic trials, and that was a really challenging time. I obviously couldn't train normally. We had to think outside the box, and I did a lot more visualization and kind of mental study and training than I was used to. And I only had about 2 weeks in the water before the trial, so it was a very different experience going up to that point, but it turned into a huge blessing and made me so much more mentally strong than I think I would have been had I not broken my foot. So sometimes those big obstacles that we encounter that we just think might be the end can actually be our biggest blessing, our biggest kind of catapult if we look for the opportunity inside of it.
Yeah, definitely. It's an inspirational story there. And I guess it's just more evidence of having a attitude where you shouldn't give up.
Exactly. Yeah. The eternal optimist.
Yeah, exactly. So as well as winning your Olympic gold medal, you've also been the first woman ever to win the 3 major diving titles. What actually are these 3 diving titles then?
It's the Olympics, the World Cup, and the World Championships. Those are all our world level events. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was it like winning them?
I mean, each competition was kind of its own beast. I'd been to lots of World Cups and lots of World Championships. It just kind of came together in those moments. And actually in 2005, I thought that might have been my last competition. I had a really bad wrist surgery January of that year that I was having a really hard time coming back from. There was a lot of pain. I wasn't able to do a lot of diving. Some days, like off the top, maybe 15 dives off of a 10 meter would be a lot in a session because it's really hard on your body. There were days I could do 10. There were days I could only do 1. And I never knew what dive would be my last one. So it shifted the way that I had to look at each dive in a practice. It made each dive so much more important. And it was actually, I'm kind of notoriously known as a finals diver where I'm like not very good in the earlier rounds, but then I come on strong later. And at that World Championships, I actually won the prelims and I stayed in the lead throughout the whole competition. And so that was such a cool moment. And I thought it was maybe going to be my last competition. So there was something really sweet about that, but it actually became a turning point where I was like, no, I want to keep going. And I actually want to learn harder dives. And I really kind of pushed the envelope for women, doing a lot of dives that no other women were doing. And really only a handful of men were doing at the time.
Yeah. And it's just exciting to have the record of being the first woman to win all 3 of them. Have you ever thought about that, really?
Yeah, that was a pretty cool thing. I feel like China tends to dominate in those statistics in our sport, and so to be able to beat that country out for that title was pretty cool.
Yeah, what is it with China? They seem to always do really well. Is it just down to them having the highest population and statistically would have more people good at it? I don't know.
Well, it's a system. I mean, they have a system. They pull kids from schools when they're little. They like we talked about the talent ID early on. They get kids that have the capabilities for diving at a very young age, and they put them where they're diving full time since they're 5, 6 years old. And so it's a totally different system than really the rest of the world. And so that's where I think they get not just really good divers, but depth. They have a lot of depth.
Yeah. Do the pools have a lot of depth?
Yeah. I think we're like on the platform side, the minimum it has to be 16 feet deep. So it's like about 5 meters, I guess. And sometimes it's as deep as 18 feet. But the springboard side, I think it has to be maybe 12 or 13. So yeah, the higher you go, the deeper you generally want the pool to be.
Yeah, definitely. Is it easy to injure yourself when diving or no?
Oh yeah. I mean, like any sport, it has its hazards. On springboard, I think you get more injury from probably repetition. Like you're having to bend the board. So sometimes there can be knee issues, or just the arm circling you have to do on springboard can do shoulder problems. On platform, it's really the impact. It's not so much the starts because it's the steady very hard surface, but you're hitting the water at 30 to 35 miles an hour. So it's kind of like a small car wreck every time. So even if you go in really good, sometimes that even hurts more. So there's a lot of wear and tear that comes with that.
Yeah. So what are each of the different individual diving sports, and which ones have you done?
The different events?
Yeah.
Within the sport? Yeah. So at the Olympic level, you have 3-meter springboard and 10-meter platform. And then there's also synchronized, where you do it with a partner next to you on the 3-meter and the 10-meter. At the world competition, they also have a 1-meter springboard. And so that's, a lot lower, obviously. And so it's not an Olympic event yet. But yeah, I mean, I've competed all 3 of them. I was decent at springboard. I made a few world meets, but I've just always been better at platform, and that's what's more exciting to me. So that's kind of where I stayed.
Have you ever peed in the pool?
I won't tell if you won't.
Okay, yeah. Just keep it between me and you and everybody listening.
Right.
So what would you say is the best part about being a diver?
The best part about being a diver? Honestly, there's kind of a camaraderie with the divers, like all around the world. It's such a small group that it's very family-like atmosphere, and you get to know everybody, whether it's within your state or your country, or if you're at the world level, you get to know the same group of divers, and you kind of grow up with them. And it's really not like any other sport I've ever been a part of or witnessed. And it's really, truly special. Like for an example, there's this girl who's a diver at University of North Carolina, and she was just diagnosed with leukemia, which is like a blood cancer. And like every club, like all the college clubs, all the age group clubs, everybody is posting these things. We dive for Emily, and everybody's in support of her, and everybody knows her because she's been at all the national meets. So there's this camaraderie that is really not like another sport I've experienced.
Yeah, that's so interesting, actually, that diving has that community in particular. Do you think it's anything to do with the sport? I don't know. Can't think of any reason, but maybe.
I think first because it's small, and so you do kind of get the same group of people at all of the meets that you get to know everybody really well.
Yeah.
But also there is a lot of fear and risk involved, and I think there's just a respect that you have naturally for the people around you doing what you're also doing, because you understand what it takes to be at that level. So I think it's several things, and most of the coaches are, people who came up in the sport as well. Like they just tend to hang around. So there's just kind of this, family reunion atmosphere every time you're on the pool deck together.
Yeah, I guess you kind of see that in diving. When everyone's finished their dives, they're kind of in the jacuzzi waiting or whatever, and you don't really see that in most other sports.
Right. It is very friendly.
Yeah, like tennis, I think you never really see them talking to each other. They're always sitting there in silence.
Right. Yeah, it's a bit different in diving, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So if you weren't doing diving, do you think there might be another sport that you'd like to try?
I don't know. I always thought beach volleyball looks kind of fun because you're on the beach, you're in the sand. I thought that looked great, but I don't know. I always loved flipping. So gymnastics and diving were really my bag. So yeah, I'm not sure that there's anything else I'd really want to do.
Yeah. Well, you tried to go for the Olympics that happened this year, but were meant to happen last year, but you didn't quite make it, did you?
No. And, for me, it was just fun being in that atmosphere again, being at an Olympic trials, having qualified to get there, and being a part of it. It was really fun. I was frustrated, not because I didn't make the Olympic team, but because I didn't feel like I had a very good competition, because we'd only had access to facilities about 3 months before the Olympic trials.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I just had this really bumpy road. I mean, obviously being older and coming back and doing this with kids was hard enough anyways. I had a 2-level cervical fusion that I spent all of 2019 coming back from. I used my Orthofix bone growth stimulator and tried to do a lot of things to come back quickly, but also wisely, since I am a mom with 4 kids and that has to take precedent. Yeah. But I spent most of that year just trying to get back up to the 10 meter. And so in 2020, I had just gotten back into competition, just relearned my dives again, and the world shut down that March. So I had maybe 2.5, 3 months there. And then we spent all year on these lower levels and we don't have a platform where I train. We have to go to other facilities, and no one would let us in because we weren't part of their team, and they didn't want any outsiders coming in with the pandemic. So it was a real struggle just getting access to places. Like when we first started going back, we were making a 7-hour drive every Saturday just to go, to this pool in San Antonio, like halfway across the state. So it was really hard to go into a trials, because I've been to 3 Olympic trials before that, always very prepared, always confident, diving well. This is a whole different experience walking into a trials going, I have only done a handful of each of my dives. I don't feel prepared. I don't feel confident. And so for me, that was just really frustrating, not feeling good about my performance. You know what I mean? Not even worried so much about the result, but just about the performance itself.
Yeah, definitely. And diving in particular would be one of the sports most affected by the pandemic, because most sports that are outside would have been one of the first things to be allowed again, but swimming pools took a while.
Yeah. And a lot of the facilities here are indoors. And so, it was much more challenging.
Yeah, definitely. I guess a good thing to come out of the Olympics this year was that our Tom Daley finally won a gold medal after all these years.
It was so awesome. And his bronze in the individual was outstanding too. That was such an amazing competition. And he didn't crack. He didn't back down. He just kept plugging away. So it was awesome to see him come away with not even just the gold, but both medals. And of course, all of his knitting in between. It was just, I loved it. That was like all the posts were about, what's Tom Daley doing? Let's check in with Tom Daley. He's still knitting.
Yeah, I think knitting has had a real surge in demand since the Olympics as well.
I bet.
Yeah. Well, where are we able to keep up to date with you if we're interested in doing so?
Well, I have my website, laurawilkinson.com. I'm also on Instagram a lot. That's kind of where I tend to hang out. And I also have a podcast called The Pursuit of Gold, where I talk to other athletes, coaches, experts, and really kind of try to not just get inspiration and encouragement from them, but try to get resources and tools and tips and tricks. So I highly recommend checking that out.
Great. Well, thanks very much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. This is fun.